Okay, guys, I'm back for chapter 10. So let's talk about developing introductions and conclusions. Sounds very important because it is the conclusion and the introduction, or the introduction and the conclusion, are two of the most important parts of your presentation because the introduction is where you will get the attention of your audience members and they will determine whether or not they're going to listen to any of the remainder of your presentation. In the conclusion, you wrap it up, and more than likely, people will definitely remember how you ended the presentation. So you want to make sure that your conclusion is strong, well put together, and it re-emphasizes your main points. So in the introduction, what is required? You're required to have an attention grabber. You're required to reveal the topic. You're required to establish credibility and goodwill, as well as preview the body of your presentation. Remember, in speeches, we want to build in redundancy, meaning that we want to re-emphasize our main points throughout our presentation. So we like to preview our main points in the introduction, elaborate on those main points in the body, and re-emphasize those main points in the conclusion. Let's look at the attention grabber. So, what can we use? We can use anything related to our topic. You can relate the topic to the audience, state the importance of the topic. You can excuse me, you can startle the audience. You can arouse curiosity. You can question the audience. Begin with the quotation, tell a story, and or use a visual aid. In regard to visual aids, you might elect to use some type of video. I don't like the word visual aid. I prefer presentation aid because you could even play a short snippet of a song. When we talk about telling a story, we're talking about presenting an illustration. Illustration is another word for a short story. Your story can be a brief illustration, just a couple of sentences to get your audience's attention, or it might be a hypothetical illustration, which is a what if story. You can also use a quotation that is related to your topic. Typically, you'll want to use a quote by someone who is considered an authority in the field or someone who just happened to say something that was groundbreaking or that was really attention grabbing. So make sure that when you use your quotations that you're using something that's extremely attention grabbing and related to your topic. You may question your audience. One, you might question them with a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that does not require a response. It's just for the sake of getting your audience to think about questions related to your topic. Also, many speakers might ask an actual question that they expect the audience members to respond to. This gets your audience members engaged, and it also can be used as an audience adaptation practice because it gets you the opportunity to understand what your audience members already know about your topic or how they feel about your topic. You want to arouse curiosity. Sometimes we build up on topics by giving a little short story, a little snippet of something with some dramatic appeal, or we might ask a question that we don't want the answer to, but it's like a really over the top question that would make you wonder, why did they ask that question? You might startle the audience by giving some type of statistic, something that's over the top, like here in the United States, we've spent over $1 trillion on student loan debt. I think one of my students said that in class, and that was a startling thought. $1 trillion, that's a lot of money. So you might use something like that to get your audience's attention. Another statistic that might be very helpful to use during a presentation is one that relates directly to the audience. For instance, if you have a statistic about the area in which the audience lives, it might provide the opportunity to show how the impact of the topic affects them right in their own homes, and they may not have even known it. Here's a short video.
You're being chased by an object of unspeakable horror, yet your legs can only move in slow motion. Each step takes unbearably long, and your frantic struggle to run faster is hopeless. Your pursuer gets closer, and your desperation turns to terror. You're completely helpless, eye to eye with death. And then you wake up, gasping for air, your heart pounding, your face clammy with sweat. It takes a few minutes for your heart and breathing to slow down. You reassure yourself that it was just a dream. Soon you drift back to sleep.
That was a really good hypothetical illustration, a what-if story. He painted a very vivid picture with dramatic shifts in vocal variety to get the audience's attention, to draw them into the presentation. He did a really good job. I'd like to see something similar to that.
You're being chased.
There I stood, wearing a surgical mask in the middle of a large, brightly lit room. In the center of the room were 5 figures, huddled over a table. I found it difficult to see since everything was draped in blue sheets, yet I didn't dare take a step towards that table. And then one of the figures called to me, "Angela, get over here and take a closer look." My knees buckled as I walked through the sterile environment, but eventually I was there, standing over an unconscious body in the operating room.
That was a really good example of an actual illustration that I imagine occurred in this young lady's life in reality. She really drew you in with sensory related terminologies. She talked about what she saw, what she felt, what she heard. All of these things paint a vivid word picture to let you, in your mind's eye, see an image of what she saw. It also works to establish credibility because it shows that this information is based on her actual experience.
Take a look at these 2 pills. Do you notice a difference between them? How about these 2? Do you see a difference here? How about these? To the naked eye, these pills are indistinguishable. But at a chemical level, they are very, very different. In each case, the pill on the left is real. It will help you get better. The pill on the right is counterfeit. It will not help you get better. In some cases, it may even kill you.
As you can see here, visual aids can be extremely effective in drawing an audience member's attention. It gives audience members something to focus on, it engages them, and it assists you in building up momentum regarding your topic. Credibility, extremely important. Within the first couple minutes of your presentation, it's critical that you establish why you should be listened to in regard to this topic. What have you experienced? What do you know? How can I trust you, or why might I be willing to believe what you have to say about this topic? There are a few different ways that you can establish credibility. Some establish credibility by referencing professional experience. Anytime you discuss a job that you've had related to the topic, internship experience that you may have had, or even volunteer hours that you've worked that have enabled you to have some type of transferable skill, you're referring to your professional experience. Academic credentials, such as classes that you may have taken, workshops that you took part in, continued education courses, webinars, degrees, certifications, all of these are academic credentials based on knowledge that you have acquired in a formal setting. A third option for establishing credibility might be citing your personal motivation. For instance, if I were going to talk about cancer, I could certainly not talk about my academic credentials because I've never gone to medical school. And if I've never gone to medical school, then I can certainly not suggest that I'm an oncologist who has been treating cancer patients for years. but I might be able to reference the fact that years ago, my grandmother found out that she had cancer, so I decided to do research to better understand how I could assist her through her transition. In regard to goodwill, think about when I talked to you about Aristotle and his idea regarding being an ethical communicator. He suggested that you must have a spirit of care. That's why personal experience and personal motivation play a critical role in establishing credibility, because it shows that you are personally invested in whatever your topic is. You may also establish goodwill by your presence, having a pleasant expression, having a tone that indicates that you're interested in a topic and that you're not just speaking for the fun of it. All of those things are beneficial in establishing credibility and goodwill. A preview statement is a statement in your introduction identifying what your main points are. In presenting your preview statement, which might come in the form of a central idea, you should be concise, look for materials as you research, be creative, finalize after body is done, and work on content delivery in detail. When I say finalize after body is done, I am saying that you want to look at your research and define what your main points are going to be, and also find supporting information that you're going to include in your outline before you ever work on your introduction. Why? Because you're going to preview your main points, and you also want an attention grabber that is going to work very well with your body and your conclusion to create a bit of connection throughout your presentation. It's always important to be creative and be unique and speak using your personal voice. The way that you present your ideas is definitely going to be unique to who you are if you're willing to be vulnerable and put forth the effort. Here's a simple introduction.
Tonight, after the sun goes down, I'd like you to go outside, lift your eyes to the heavens, and gaze at the night sky. If it's clear, you'll be able to see the moon, some stars, and maybe some distant planets. Yet right outside our atmosphere is something not so beautiful, something that Scientific American calls a minefield in Earth orbit. Another name for this minefield is junk, space junk. Satellites that no longer work, pieces from spent rockets, debris from collision of man-made objects. Together, they form a floating landfill that orbits the Earth at speeds of over 18,000 miles per hour. The European Space Agency estimates that there are hundreds of thousands of pieces of space junk. I first learned about space junk last year in my physics class. Now, after doing research for this speech, I understand why there's an international effort to clean up the landfill whirling around our planet. Today, we'll look first at the history of space junk, then at the way it's affecting space exploration, and finally, at some proposals scientists have advanced to clean it up.
Awesome introduction. She really drew you in by giving you a charge to think about her topic even after you've heard the speech. Then she established credibility by discussing that she had academic credentials. She took a class during which she was taught about this subject. And finally, she previewed her main points. Conclusions. Conclusions should signal the end of your speech while reinforcing your central idea. Do not forget, build in redundancy, preview your main points, elaborate on those main points, and then re-emphasize your main points at the end. So crescendo the ending. Some people suggest that you should build to a zenith of power and intensity. Start off with a strong beginning, build up during the body in terms of grabbing your audience's attention and getting more and more serious or more and more dramatic throughout the body of your presentation, and then cap it off with a call to action at the end that brings all of the information to a center that your audience member is, or audience members are to a certain degree, forced into wanting to think about or forced into wanting to do something about. Some people dissolve the end by generating emotional appeal and fading to a dramatic final statement. You might start out with a story about a little girl who experienced some type of hardship and not end that story until the very end when you say whatever happened to the little girl at the end, or whatever has happened to her most recently that might be dramatic or might be emotionally stimulating or might be even hopefully a happy ending. Reinforce your idea or your central idea by summarizing the speech. Go back over the main points that you referenced in the beginning and that you elaborated on during the body. Maybe you want to end with a quotation that is related to your speech, or a secondary quotation from whoever the first quote was that you included in your introduction. Make a dramatic statement, a call to action. Tell them, the next time you think about this subject, be sure to remember these things that have been discussed today. You might even decide to refer to the introduction, no matter what your attention grabber was, or no matter what you did or used in order to establish credibility. Here's an example of a summary and a conclusion.
In conclusion, we have seen how tuberculosis has recently returned as a global health crisis. It is infecting and killing on a massive scale. Especially in third world countries, TB is decimating those who need the most help. But there is hope. The World Health Organization and countries like the United States can expand their efforts to treat and prevent TB. We have the money, we have the know-how. Now we just need to come together and put an end to this epidemic.
Here's an example of referring back to an introduction.
It was supposed to be a time of celebration. 5 friends had gathered in a South Florida hotel room to celebrate a birthday. Jutrin Marshall, one of the 5, was turning 19. But the day after the birthday party, a maid passing by the hotel room glanced through a window and saw 5 dead bodies. All 5 friends had been killed. Their killer was silent, invisible, odorless, and tasteless. Their killer was carbon monoxide. The friends had left their car running in a carport directly beneath their hotel room. Carbon monoxide seeped into their room and took their lives, as it does the lives of 400 people a year in the United States. Remember those 5 friends I mentioned in the introduction of my speech? Their deaths were tragic and unnecessary. I hope the information I have provided today will help you avoid their fate. By understanding where carbon monoxide comes from, by recognizing the warning signs of carbon monoxide poisoning, and by following the simple preventive steps I've discussed, you can make sure that you don't fall victim to the silent killer.
So in preparing your conclusion, look for materials while you're doing your research. It's important that while you're building on the body, selecting your main points, and selecting the supporting information, that you're thinking about what you could potentially discuss in your introduction and conclusion. Make sure that you don't die out at the end of your speech. We don't want you to say, "That's my speech," or "That's the end," or simply, "Thank you for listening." Say something that is going to really get your audience's attention and make your presentation memorable. While doing this, don't go on and on. Don't introduce any more additional information. Be brief and concise and straight to the point. Here's one more sample conclusion.
In conclusion, while humans have managed to go boldly where no one has gone before, we've also left a lot of garbage behind. Space junk is growing every day and poses serious problems for the future of space exploration. Fortunately, scientists from NASA and the international community are exploring ingenious ways of taking out the trash. So the next time you're outside at night, Lift your gaze upwards. You'll see the moon, stars, and perhaps a couple planets. But now you'll know there's a lot more up there than meets the eye.
All right, guys, that's all on introductions and conclusions. After reading the text, if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, as always, feel free to reach out.